You are listening to the Outside the Boards podcast. I'm Danny O'Leary. For most of my professional career, I have worked in mainstream sports for some of the world's leading sports organizations and properties and blue-chip brands, helping to create award-winning omni-channel marketing campaigns, result-driven sales strategies, and impactful brand-building initiatives. But all that work doesn't compare to the fun, excitement, and challenges I've been fortunate to experience working for the king of all sports, polo. For nearly a decade, I've put my heart and ambition into helping advance the sport of polo. I've made lifelong friendships, met some incredible people, traveled to memorable polo destinations, and heard the craziest stories. My goal is to share these people, places, and stories with you and provide a unique behind-the-scenes perspective of the game that breaks all the common stereotypes, all while discussing key issues affecting the sport today and the constructive sharing of ideas, insights, solutions, and best case studies for the purpose of advancing polo globally. Every week, I will have honest conversations with polo industry leaders, enthusiasts, and awe-inspiring people who make this sport great and fun to be around. I hope through their knowledge and their unique perspectives, they will motivate and inspire you. Together, we will explore ways you can make small tweaks to boost your polo business, whether you are a club, event, team, or player, that will amount to big changes in revenue, participation, attendance, and exposure. Saddle up. Welcome to Outside the Boards with me, Danny O'Leary. Danny O'Leary here, and welcome to Season 4 of the Outside the Boards podcast. Before we kick off Season 4, I want to again thank all our listeners for continuing to tune in to our episodes. Over the last 3 seasons, we have reached over 14,000 listeners from over 25 countries. Season 3 has already eclipsed the number of listeners this time than from our previous seasons. Thank you, and please listen and help spread the word about this beautiful sport. On this episode of Outside the Boards, we had the honor of diving into the life and experiences of a remarkable individual, a leader in both the military and the world of polo. Our guest has learned a unique blend of skill, strategy, and a sportsmanship from the battlefield and the polo field. Joining us is Captain Patrick Shanahan, a distinguished figure with a rich background in both horsemanship and military service. Born and raised in California, Captain Shanahan spent his formative years at Culver Military Academy in Indiana, where his journey with polo began. Patrick's connection with the sport runs deep. Influenced by his father's initiation into polo in the early 2000s, solidifying the Shanahan family's love for the game, a true horseman, Patrick grew up with a profound appreciation for the bond between rider and horse, a relationship that laid the foundation for his leadership philosophy. As a military officer, Patrick's commitment to serving his country led him to join the Army. His dedication to soldiers and a desire to make a difference in the world defined his illustrious career, marked by leadership roles and a passion for advancing military polo. In the recent National Arena Commander-in-Chief Cup, Patrick Shanahan rode with the Army team to a thrilling victory against the defending champions, Navy. Beyond the exhilarating competition, this event represents a broader mission: to foster camaraderie and advance military polo on both national and international stages. Today, we have the privilege of delving into Patrick Shanahan's journey in polo, the historical connection between the military and the sport, and the invaluable lessons learned on and off the field. So without further ado, let's welcome Patrick. Enjoy. Patrick Shanahan. Did I get that correctly?
You did, Danny. Thanks very much for having me on.
Oh, no, not a problem, man. Happy Thanksgiving to you. Hope you had a wonderful holiday. Now, you're in Oklahoma, right?
That's right. Just moved here. We've been on the ground for about 3 weeks. Finally got our house squared away and ready for the next chapter.
Only 3 weeks, huh? And you got your house already squared away?
Yes, that's right. We had some company for Thanksgiving. That was my backstop. So we were sure we got everything done on time.
That's a good backstop. That's a good backstop. Company is always the way to do it. I just had some stuff done on my house, and we had to get it done before November 11th when we were having about 40 people over.
Wow.
Yeah, but still, I mean, 3 weeks settling in, that's impressive, man. Now, where were you coming from?
We just moved from Fort Moore, Georgia.
Fort Moore, Georgia. Now, what part of the state is that in?
That's actually really formerly Fort Benning. Should be more familiar with anybody that's familiar with the military. But it's in Columbus, Georgia, which is about halfway down the state and right on the border with Alabama.
Got it. Now, what brought you to Oklahoma?
Well, I've actually just left the active duty Army, my last waning days of terminal leave. and I've decided to take a job with Love's Travel Stops doing operations management, and they asked me to come here in Oklahoma. So I'm enjoying time in Oklahoma City right now.
Nice, nice. I know the U.S. Canoe and Kayak are headquartered in Oklahoma. I think they have a makeshift rapids or river, I think, in Oklahoma City.
I'll have to check that out when the weather gets warmer.
I say that because they used to be a client of mine when I was at a company called IEG, when I consulted on behalf of buyers and properties in the areas of sponsorship. And that was one of my clients. They were going through a real big renovation there downtown and building this kind of fabricated rapids, if you will. So there you go. You'll have to check it out. Yes, when the weather gets a lot warmer.
Definitely.
So Patrick, tell us a little bit about yourself. Your name has obviously popped up. There's a great article in Click Polo that talks about the U.S. Arena Military Cup and you guys taking the cup home and winning that tournament. Tell us a little bit about yourself and who are you? So you're originally from Georgia, right? Or no?
No, actually, I'm from California.
California. Okay. Whereabouts in California?
The San Francisco Bay Area.
Okay. Parents still there?
My dad is, that's right. Yeah.
And then how old are you, Patrick? You're a young guy, right?
29.
29. So do you go to school out there in California?
I did. So I grew up in California, went off to Culver Military Academy, really enjoyed that. And then I went back to the Bay Area for 4 years at Santa Clara University prior to joining the Army in 2016.
Okay. And I think I read that you went to Culver, right?
That's right.
All right. See, that's not that far away from us here in Chicago.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm familiar with O'Hare and Midway.
Well, I think a couple of people in the world of polo have went there. I know our one household name that we have in Chicago, Pamela Flanagan, is a Culver graduate.
Absolutely.
That's wonderful, man. So was that your introduction to polo, or did it come long before that?
It came a little before that. Well, definitely horses did. I come from a family of horsemen, grew up doing pony clubs, junior rodeos, trail rides through our hometown. So horses were something that was really important in my family, still are. And my dad got into polo later in life. And so when I was about 11, 12 is when I started playing. So I got started in that at a very low level and then went to Culver. And that really, added the whole other degree of interest. I had some great coaches there. I had, Tom Goodspeed, Claudio Gana, Joe Muldoon, and Ed Little were all my coaches at one point or another. And it really was great, a great experience.
So where specifically in California were you from that had all this trail riding and equestrian sport?
Yeah, I'm from a small town called Woodside, which anybody from the Bay might be familiar with, but it's basically kind of around Redwood City, Palo Alto, Stanford area. It's about maybe 30 minutes south of San Francisco itself.
Okay. So would you call it like the equestrian hub of California in a way? There's just so much activity around there?
I mean, there's a few different places in California that a lot of different folks will have different horse sports. And I think what makes Woodside really unique is it's got a really extensive network of trails, in the foothills of the Santa Cruz Mountains. And so if you have enough time, you can ride a horse from downtown Woodside over the mountain and to the beach.
That's pretty neat.
So
a lot of like very recreational type equestrian activity, trail riding, very leisurely.
Absolutely. I mean, when I look back on my childhood, the ability to just get on a horse and go for a ride after school, it created some sort of independence and responsibility that I think has really served me well.
Now, you said your dad got in. Did your dad get into the sport before you were born?
No, I don't think so. I would say I was probably 8 or so when he got started. But I think that he just got an interest in it. He's a big history guy. He is a great admirer of Winston Churchill and George Patton. And I'm sure that he picked it up in a book somewhere and he said, gee, that sounds like kind of a fun thing. Maybe I should give it a try.
He has his historical admirers, huh?
Right.
And so, well, then you picked it up relatively quick thereafter then, if you said you kind of got started when you were 10 or 11.
Yeah, so he got me into it basically as soon as he could, because, of course, he caught the bug immediately, as one does. And I was really fortunate to, get started playing so young, but also to have been riding before that. So, as anybody does, if you go play polo already having some idea how to ride a horse, it'll help you a lot.
Now, it sounds like you're in other equestrian disciplines, or you had your hand in some of them. What attracted you the most to the sport of polo?
Well, I think that what I've come to love about it, the first thing is obviously is just adrenaline. And I mean, it's a cool sport, right? That's what attracts you, I think, in the early stages. And then really quickly, I realized that it's so much more than that. And I think what really sustains it, at least sustains me, is the marrying of the discipline, emotional intelligence, and finesse that's required for horsemanship. And then you add in the competitiveness and teamwork. So you have two partners out there, which is your horse and your teammates. And I think that's just something I've never been able to find somewhere else.
Mm-hmm. Now, the idea of playing alongside your dad have anything to do with it as well?
That was a lot of fun. Yeah. I always enjoyed playing with my dad. And he played up until he was well into his 70s and just somewhat recently hung it up. But that was probably my favorite thing about growing up with my dad was playing polo together. That was a lot of fun. And we got to go to different places. We would get down to the Palm Desert most winters. That was always a fun trip. And then really just playing club chuckers up in the San Francisco Bay Area and having him coach me and then learning and just as we progressed together and we got to a point where we kind of naturally could play off each other really well because he was a really natural back, kind of more strategic, big hitter. And I was the young monkey man who thought I could do anything. So it worked out.
Now, did you guys own your own horses?
Yeah, we did. At one point, I think we had 5 or so.
Okay, wonderful. And you guys were just sharing them when you guys were playing together?
So I would always play my dad's horses growing up. And then, I ended up getting a few of my own over the years. By the time I was 19, 20, I had 2, 3 of my own at different moments.
Oftentimes, Patrick, when I talk to people, you see a lot of these dynasty families that have been in the sport. A great deal of it is rooted in that family camaraderie or family interests, if you will. The idea of growing up and playing alongside your mom or your dad or both or brothers and sisters. There's always a unique tie to that. A lot of the people from Hope Ariana to Pamela Flanagan to countless others, Jared Zenny and some of those where there's just that family camaraderie or that connection to equestrian sport is always common. So you always constantly see that people like you just blossoming into their sport because their parents had an affinity for it. And nothing came before your father. There was no grandfather or grandmother that was involved in the sport either.
No, yeah, not in polo. Definitely a long line of horsemen, but yeah, my dad.
Okay, there was. So in horses in general, there's a long line in the Shanahan family.
Definitely. Both sides. My mom is definitely an accomplished equestrian in her own right, working advising the Olympic Committee back in the day.
Oh, wow.
She still will do coaching and judging for jumpers and things like that. So she's still very much involved. But I think you're right. I mean, I think that the family connection, I think really to any horse sport, I think really does help a lot. And for horses specifically, I think it's because you learn from a very early age that you have this animal that's your partner that is depending on you for day-to-day care, but also guidance and direction, whatever you're doing, what it is you're doing. I think that just when you grow up in that environment, it becomes a lot more intuitive so that by the time you're an adult, you're not having to figure it out from zero.
Yeah, you have a great quote. I'll read it to you right now. The horse teaches us leadership better than any activity I found. We are to care for this animal, respect its instincts, and provide it with direction. The rider must always be thinking about the next turn, jump, or other tasks, such as in the role of a leader. Yeah, that's a really great statement. My daughter, who will be turning 8, she started playing polo herself at, just before she turned 7.
Cool.
Partly is because she's very tall for her age. So she had the ability and strength to kind of manage a pony, if you will. But I remember growing up, riding in general and the lessons and skills it teaches you at such a young age, especially bravery. I always tell people it's really, really hard to get up on an animal that big. And it's even harder to fall off and then get back on that animal.
Definitely. And that's a hesitation you see whenever anybody starts, but especially an adult that understands that they're not invincible.
Yeah.
That sense of self-preservation is real. So you're right. The physical courage is definitely necessary. And I think, again, you get started as a younger person, it's going to pay dividends.
Now, do you have kids yourself now or no?
I do not. But rest assured, when I do, they will be Malik and Hayes.
And how many siblings do you have?
I've got 2. I've got an older brother and an older sister.
And are they into polo or equestrian sports?
Just my sister. So my sister Kelly is a phenomenal horsewoman. She took into the 100 jumper 3-day eventing crowd, and she lives up north of Chicago, up in your area, up in Winnetka. Her horses are actually out in California in pasture, but because Kelly and her husband travel around a lot. Mm-hmm. But yeah, she's definitely very dedicated to horses and really took that saying, we both came from this background. We learned to have this animal care for it and nurture and direct it in whatever exercise we're doing. And then she went the hunter jumper route, and I went the rodeo polo route.
Now, did you play any other team sports growing up?
Not really. The sports that I've been exposed to, I've dabbled in martial arts and shooting sports, but really the only like true team sport that I've ever played seriously was polo.
Ah, that's interesting. So in California, you started playing polo between 10 and 11. And then for your high school years, you were out here at Culver, right?
That's right.
And did you go to Culver because of their equestrian background?
Well, not actually. So the reason why I wanted to go to Culver was because I wanted to be an Army officer. That was like the only thing I ever wanted to do in my entire life when I wanted to grow up was be an Army officer. Maybe because my dad was also an infantry officer in Vietnam. So that probably had something to do with it. But I grew up really just wanting to be a leader and take care of soldiers. And I thought, let's just go to military school because that sounds fun.
I'm going to quote you on that.
And in hindsight, it was the best thing I ever made. Culver Military Academy is a phenomenal institution. It fulfilled all my hopes and dreams of teaching me how to be a team player and a leader, especially in an environment with peers and everybody's a teenager and you're trying to row in the same direction. And you learn how to be responsible, not just for yourself, but for your peers and everybody else around you. And the idea of service before self and all these things being ingrained into you at a young age. And then on top of that, Culver has a phenomenal horsemanship program. I was in the Black Horse Troop there where we did all these different parades and exhibitions and all those types of things, teach you how to be a great horseman, you did rough riding without a saddle and all these kind of funny vaulting type maneuvers. And then, of course, playing polo. I had these great coaches there, 4 coaches in 4 years that were just all fantastic. And I got to learn so much from them and my teammates, just such great guys. And I'm blessed that I still get to see some of those folks to today.
Who were some of your teammates back then that are still playing?
The first one that comes to mind is going to be Mike Muldoon.
Mm-hmm.
His dad, Joe, was actually one of our coaches as well. But Mike and I played together for 3 years at Culver. And I just played with him this last time at the CNC and then the year before that. And then, of course, there's other, I kind of came up at Culver in the shadow of giants with CB and Austin Shear being there playing. Well, CB had graduated the year before I got there, and then, the Chandlers. And then, of course, you mentioned Pamela Flynn again. I think she was a senior when I was a freshman. They were always really fantastic players out there. And it was a really great competitive environment to grow up in and learn in.
Now, how did you perform when you guys were there?
Not nearly as well as the Culver team performed before we got there. I think that team I mentioned briefly with CB and those guys, I think they were national champions at one point. But, I was just blessed to be able to be in this environment and learn, and we got to travel around a lot, go down to play in Midland and Georgia and up in Virginia and just kind of do all these trips and really get exposed to all different kinds of people. And really, that's where I started to learn one of the things that really sets polo apart is it's the culture of our sport and how it's uniformly, and in my experience at this point across the world, one of just friendly competition and total hospitality amongst all the competitors. And it's really been great over the years.
Before we dive back in today's buzzing conversation, we would like to give a special shout out to this season's Outside the Boards podcast extraordinary presenting sponsor, Hive 2.0, the pioneers of hard honey, where passion meets palate. Hive 2.0 is not just a beverage, it's a commitment to the greater good. With over 30 years of perfecting ready-to-drink flavor profiles, Hive 2.0 introduces you to hard honey. It's more than just a drink. It's an experience crafted by a dedicated in-house team, including their beekeeper, formulator, and full cycle production squad. They move hives, protect queens, and manage honey production, all to make a difference with hard honey. Why choose Hive 2.0? Because when it comes to taste, there's nothing like it. Each can is carefully crafted, palate-forward experience with a unique story behind every batch. Lightly carbonated for a subtle effervescence, it's a journey from the first sip to the last. Hive 2.0 uses honey, a natural sweetener rich in antioxidants, vitamins, and minerals. Unlike refined sugar, honey has a lower glycemic index, providing a slow rise in blood sugar levels. From their hard honey to alcohol-free refreshments, each Hive 2.0 flavor tells a unique tale, from historic Egyptian times to the modern porch-pounding experiences. Whether you're sipping an Atomic Berry's tropical tartness or savoring the nostalgic taste of PB&J, Hive 2.0 has something for every palate. So join us in raising a can to Hive 2.0, A salute to taste, innovation, and the bees. Thank you, Hive 2.0, for sweetening our lives. Listen to the end of this podcast to be awarded with a special discount code when purchasing Hive 2.0 online at www.hardhoney.com. And now, back to the interview. Stay tuned, stay refreshed, and stay curious. Now, after Culver, where'd you go to school afterwards? Or did you go right into the military?
No, I did not. From Culver, again, went to school to be an Army officer. And I chose to go to Santa Clara University out in California because they had a really reputable Army ROTC program, and I knew that would be a good place for me to get trained up. But of course, it was also right in the smack dab middle of all my home polo clubs. So went back there, and so for 4 years was in college and playing polo at every spare minute I could find.
And Santa Clara had a polo team?
It did not.
It did not.
It's kind of funny that I chose the school without a polo team. But again, in hindsight, I'm really glad that I did, because that season of my, that 4-year season, I'll say, of my life in this sport is among the best. I mean, it might be the best. I timed it really well. Somehow, when I graduated Culver in 2012, my now really good friend, Jeff Shiraga, was moving out that way to the Pacific Coast to start his business. And we became fast friends and, really closely together over the years. And he taught me so much. He's immensely talented at what he does. And by the time we were, a couple of years into that, I was a certified umpire. And Jeff and I had this high school polo team that we coached together for the whole time I was there. It was just so rewarding to see these young people develop that physical courage, emotional intelligence, and sportsmanship necessary for our sport.
Mm-hmm. Now, what did you study while you were at Santa Clara?
Communication.
Communications. Woohoo. I teach that at Northwestern.
Oh, really? That's cool.
Communications and crisis management. There's a lot of crises that can happen in polo. No, that's wonderful, man. So following your days at Santa Clara, what did you do next?
So at 2016, I commissioned in the U.S. Army. I chose to be in the infantry because, my whole guiding star had been take care of soldiers. So that's what I wanted to do. And I figured that's where I could do it the best. So went from Santa Clara, basically left polo behind, which was an interesting moment. But went down to Fort Benning, Georgia to do the infantry officer basic course and follow-on training. And then spent the following 7 years in the Army.
Now, did any of that take you overseas?
A couple places, yeah. We did, a few things here and there, but really spent a lot of time. I went from Fort Benning, Georgia up to Fort Lewis, Washington, where I was a striker platoon leader, and then did some stuff out of there, and then went back to Fort Benning, where I did a maneuver captain's career course and took command of a training company there, and that was my last assignment. Okay. Now, was there any moment in your military career where you could do anything related to horses or no? No, not really. Not as far as an official position of some sort. Being an infantry officer, it's not really something that's on the cards. Even so, there's not many around. I think 1st Cavalry Division has a exhibition unit that's pretty cool. But that's pretty much it, I think. Okay. Now, for our listeners who are not familiar with this side of polo, there is a lot of deep roots between the sport of polo and the U.S. military, especially when it involved in the days of cavalries. So, Patrick, I don't mean to put the spotlight on you, but I'm wondering if you can kind of draw on the historical context between our sport and the U.S. military. Sure, I could try. You kind of alluded to it with the cavalry thing, and I'll definitely start by saying something about a great Army officer that everyone's probably heard of, is General George Patton. This guy existed in this unique moment in time with the transition from horse cavalry to armor. And he was a big proponent of the cavalry, which is why he was a big proponent of mechanized warfare, because it's the same high tempo sort of capability. And so, of course, in the cavalry tradition, it was with 4 legs and not 2 tracks. The polo was used to train cavalrymen because, obviously it makes you steady in the saddle and it gives you the hand-eye coordination to mess with the sword, and it teaches you teamwork on top of everything else, which is paramount in any venture, certainly in the military. So we had, as early as I know, as far as 1896, we had some Army polo matches out in Fort Riley, Kansas. And from that cavalry training thing, there was 3,000 Army polo players between World War I and World War II. And then, we had the shift away from traditional cavalry to that more mechanized force. And so by 1947, the military pulled away from polo, at least in an official capacity, for training purposes. Now, I know that the I'm sure the Academy maintained a polo team for many decades thereafter. And then, by 1992, thanks to some invitations and the USPA, specifically the Armed Forces Committee, we were able to kind of revive it from a non-official standpoint. So it's no longer under the auspices of the Defense Department, but from the USPA. Now we have I was just doing a search earlier. I think it looks like we have 350 former or current service members that are registered members of the USPA.
Of those service members that are with the USPA, are they mostly Army, Navy, Marines, Air Force?
I don't know exactly, but I would imagine that the majority is Army, just given the size of the Army.
Mm-hmm.
So, cursory glance at the member portal looks like 170 of those are affiliated with the Army in some way.
You mentioned earlier in our interview about the Black Horse Troop, and I know that's associated with the Culver Academies now. I don't know if you're familiar with who started that Black Horse Troop at all. It originally came from Paul Butler, the founder of the Oak Brook Polo team out of the Chicago Armory. There's a really great photo, I think, from like 1936, I think, when the World's Fair was here. It shows Paul Butler leading the Black Horse Troop through downtown Chicago. And it's a beautiful spectacle to see everyone so decked out and just everyone in military dress and all their horses in unison. It's a beautiful thing. And it's great that Culver Academies has kind of carried on that tradition.
Yeah, it really felt like, especially being so young and stepping into this organization, Culver, it's just such a rich history.
Mm-hmm.
So when you go there, as a 13-year-old kid and you're in this formation on this horse, I felt the weight of it, and knowing that we were carrying on some traditions that really in a lot of ways hadn't changed since 1894, if I'm not mistaken.
Now, the U.S. Military Cup, it's arena, first of all. And then, by the way, I didn't even touch base on that. When you were growing up with polo, were you predominantly playing arena polo or outdoor on the grass?
Started off with both, but of course, going to Culver, I played predominantly arena. That's my roots. So I've always had a higher arena handicap. I've always known the sport better, but definitely played a little bit on the grass in California as well.
So going back to the U.S. Military Arena Cup, which took place this past October, how'd you do?
We were grateful to be able to take it home for the Army this year. So we won in the final on the Army team did.
How many teams competed?
So this event was a little bit bigger this year. It was really the week of military polo. So we came in on Wednesday and we had an international match with our friends from England. And then we went into the Commander-in-Chief Cup, which Commander-in-Chief Cup, to answer your question, is 4 teams, each representing 4 service branches in the military.
Okay. Not Space Force yet?
No, we don't have a Space Force team. I'll have to keep my ear to the ground and see if we can't wrangle somebody up.
Now, there's no any sort of equestrian discipline whatsoever to the U.S. military in any retrospect. Like, there's nothing at all, despite the fact that there has been a strong history. They themselves don't have any committees or from a historical context where they're involved at all?
The military itself?
Yeah, the military itself.
Well, to my knowledge, the U.S. Army has horses. I mentioned it at Fort Hood and 1st Cav Division. And then we also have, I forgot to mention, there's the Old Guard, which is a ceremonial unit out in Washington, D.C. that has a lot of horses. And my friend, Colonel Amos Peterson, is a veterinarian out there. So he is a part of a committee that is advising on equine welfare in the Army. I know that's we're taking very, very serious look at right now. But that's, again, for our operational stock, not, to my knowledge, any sort of official representation toward the advancement of our sport.
But some of these forts that you mentioned, like the one that you were at, they do have their own horses, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, there's a benefit for having this sport within the military, but I don't think that we have an official representation. I'm not sure I understand the question.
I think what I was getting at was, I'm surprised that the sport itself, even though it's not used in any sort of warfare, is just from a recreational side of things and getting active duty service members playing it, for that matter. There's individuals like yourself who have served for our country, they play the sport and so on and so forth. You'd wonder why that with horses that are available, why aren't active servicemen potentially playing it from a recreational standpoint? I don't know if there's an opportunity there.
To kind of branch it out into a more official capacity.
Yeah.
Yeah, there is an opportunity. I mean, again, a lot of these bases, they used to have garrisons of horses.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of these bases do have some sort of stables on them. Usually they're just some boarding for whoever happens to have a trail horse or two. So military does have the facilities for it. A lot of places have parade fields. I've always wanted to play polo on a parade field. So I think the capability is certainly there. It just probably comes down to a resourcing perspective and what do we want to allocate towards what in terms of time and other resources. I do know that those of us that are involved, including some very high-ranking officials, understand the benefit of our sport in particular, but probably any horse sport to a degree, that a military leader would get out of it. We talked a lot about leadership and teamwork and all that. I think that it certainly helped me.
You mentioned 1992, and that was the year that the USPA formed the military committee. Is that correct?
I know that was the year that we received an invitation from the United Kingdom to put together a military team to go over there and play against their military team. Obviously, that's something important to them as well.
Oh, but we don't know when the Armed Forces Committee was probably created.
I don't know off the top of my head, but what I know now is it's been a great part of the USPA, headed by my friend Mark Gillespie, who is just a networker in chief to keeping all this going.
Mm-hmm. By any chance, you don't know when the U.S. Arena Cup was created, or was that created in 1992 when we were?
So I don't know exactly when it was, but it's gone back for a while, and it changed names at one point.
Mm-hmm.
First time I played in it was in 2015. I was still a cadet, actually, in college, and it was the Inter-Service Military Polo Cup. We played that down in El Dorado in California. And at some point since then, it changed names to the Commander-in-Chief Cup.
In 2012, the founders of Outside the Boards witnessed their first polo match and were stunned by the sport's beauty and brutality. Few sports, if any, have these combined qualities. The sport's grace, intensity, and warlike imagery create a shock and awe viewing experience like none other. Combine this with the sport's party-like atmosphere and lifestyle, and you have a recipe for success. Today, the sport has yet to witness its full potential. The industry is fragmented, riddled with politics and inexperience. Outside the Boards was purposely designed to change all that and bring clarity to the sport by introducing best practices, insights, trends, and consulting services to industry stakeholders and interested brands so that they can reach their marketing potential and better navigate the sport. Whether you're a club seeking custom sponsorship and marketing solutions or simply looking for strategic advice, we encourage you to contact us today or subscribe to gain access to industry insights. Visit us at www.outsidetheboards.com or to learn more or email us at info@outsidetheboards.com. Now, for those who are listening, you mentioned George S. Patton. Are there other famous military men that you can rattle off that were involved in polo that we might know? Wasn't Roosevelt one?
Definitely. Well, that was back in the, Roosevelt being a military horseman with the Rough Riders and everything else. All those guys were probably polo players at some point.
Yeah.
Everyone knows that there was an era when that was, especially in the military, that was what everybody did.
Well, and not to mention, those who became cavalry officers, they trained in polo and then thereafter continued to play the sport. That's the trajectory and the lifeline of polo back then. It was just kind of way things work. You'd be surprised just how much military and the cavalry aspect had such a tremendous influence on our sport that I bet a lot of families can tie it back to at one point a family member who got their start in polo from being on cavalry. I suspect. I'm just kind of throwing out there with zero statistics at all. But yeah. I got to imagine that's where a lot of the roots are going back then.
Yeah, I certainly wouldn't be surprised. I just see a lot of similarities. I think even in the culture, because polo, we talk about, it's a gentleman's sport, and then the way that competitors treat each other, and there's a certain degree of honor that goes into it. And that's something that I found is also something that is in the military officer culture, at least as far from historical precedent, something that we take seriously.
Now, do you think that the benefits of training officers in polo back during our cavalry days was also used to train those horses in cavalry as well in that type of warfare setting?
Sure. I can certainly see the crossover. Again, it has to do with physical courage and certainly a certain physicality that, horse would, and also when we talk about having this two partners between you, your horses and your teammates. And you're as much of that horse's partner as it is yours.
Mm-hmm.
So, when you build trust in them, they build trust in you. So that's that relationship that all our listeners are going to know about is something that the cavalry certainly had to depend on as well in combat.
Yeah. Well, and horses, bumping up against each other and riding up against each other people and your other fellow servicemen going into warfare and so on and so forth, and your opponent's horses as well. Polo, a lot of times, is drawn on to being war itself.
Mm-hmm.
Take lacrosse as an example, from Native Americans who invented the sport. And they were used as a means to train and prepare themselves for warfare as well, ironically. Polo being the exact same thing, polo being the oldest team sport there is in the world. So it's fascinating to go down this rabbit hole in the sports history with the military and warfare in general. And I hope it's interesting to our listeners to see this side of the game. What would you like to see in terms of the Armed Forces Polo Committee, and what do you want to see the sport tied to that specific area in the future? Are you on the committee itself or no?
No. Well, the thing is, I think with the Armed Forces Committee, the Army Polo Club, and now the Military Equestrian Foundation, these are all groups that are a lot of the same people working on all these things, but they're all my friends up in Virginia outside Washington, D.C. And they're all working on the same thing, which is to advance military polo, which I know sounds like so broad that it means nothing. But when you dig into it, what we're talking about is it's as an infantry officer, I know that my experience playing polo has made me better and has served the soldiers of this country that I've gotten to work with. And so as we advance military polo, what we're doing is we are creating a strategic benefit for the defense establishment of this country.
Mm-hmm.
And now as a member of the USPA, what I'll also say is we need more polo players. I would like to see us do things broadly that are aimed at kind of lowering the barrier to entry and increasing our amateur base and really building up the next generation. I mentioned the Military Equestrian Foundation. That's a pretty new thing that some of my friends up there are working on. And what they're doing is exactly that. They're trying to create sponsorships and bring in more folks by providing horses and enabling pros to provide lessons. And my buddy Alex Jenkins and Don Bramer and Mark Gillespie and others are just doing such great work on all that.
Now, I know, up here in Chicago, through the Oak Brook Polo Club, we've had a few equestrian therapy groups come in that have used horses as a means for treating people with PTSD.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the people who have come through there have some type of military background. Do you think through organizations like that, polo might be one of those therapeutic things to do, is playing the sport for those individuals?
Yeah, I definitely think so. I certainly think it could work. I think everybody's unique and would, maybe benefit differently from different things. But, certainly with my experience in the military with young infantrymen who just want to eat nails and break things, I think polo would be something that they would latch onto a lot more quickly than some other equine disciplines that I've seen.
Yeah, considering in your role as a captain and leading these young men, I feel like there is people who are out of that service but want to retain some of that camaraderie that they might have from a therapeutic standpoint, and doing along that with other former soldiers with other conditions, I think it is a value. It's because I know the groups that we've worked with, I know they have equestrian people, whether they're hunter jumper or trail riding or so on and so forth, to use that, but I know they don't have that polo discipline as well. And maybe there's an opportunity there, and maybe this is a call for those people who are existing servicemen that play polo, or if there's an opportunity to institute something like that from a team aspect to it for those existing equine therapeutic organizations out there. That'll be really great to see. I think it's introducing people to an entire new audience, and that connection between polo and military, I think, is great.
Yeah, I sure would. I would like to see that too.
Well, Patrick, I can't thank you enough for joining me on this podcast. And you are my first of season 4. So it's a very big position to take. Just telling you right now.
Oh, man.
So do you have any big plans for the holiday?
No, not much. So I mentioned that I took a job with Love's Travel Stops, so I'm actually starting that. I guess by the time this airs, I'll have started that, but I'll be starting tomorrow. So I'll be just where we working. I don't know exactly what Christmas looks like.
Now, what is the polo scene out there in Oklahoma?
There is a club out in Jones, OKC Polo Club. I have not yet made it out there, but I rest assured I will be very soon, especially with the season being where we're at. So
Now, do you have horses out there too? Did you bring them along?
no, I don't. That's the other thing. I'm looking to rebuild my polo life. I eventually mentioned I sort of left it behind when I joined the Army, and I was kind of bumping around playing when I could play since then. But now that I'm off of active duty, I'd really like to rebuild. So I'll be working over that the next couple of years.
Excellent. Well, we're excited to see some good things come out of Oklahoma. I think it's a perfect town for it. My wife's cousin's husband played a little bit of polo, I think, when he was in college. And they live out in Oklahoma now. So maybe you can recruit him.
Yeah, sure.
To come out there as an effort to grow the community up there. But hey, Patrick, I wish you the best of luck, man. Happy holidays to you and your family. Is there any parting words you want to say before we sign off?
Danny, I just can't thank you for having me on. I mean, it's really nice to be able to chat about this. I love our sport so much. And, I think what we need as a sport is to increase awareness and lower barriers. And that's, I've been listening to your podcast for a while, and that's exactly what you do. And I really appreciate everything you're doing for the sport that we all love so much.
I really appreciate it, man. That's my goal, is to break down the stereotypes and introduce people to the world of polo that they might not think of. I think oftentimes people perceive it too much as the sport that they saw in that movie from Pretty Woman or Prince William and Harry playing it. There's so much to this game, and you alluded to a great deal of it with the military connections. And that's a really important part of our history, especially in the United States and other countries as well, because there's no doubt that they use polo as a means to train their cavalry officers back in the day. And that was how warfare existed, until you mentioned, in the article that I read, until the machine gun was created. Then all that aspect kind of just disappeared. So just fantastic history. And we don't talk about a lot of history. It's always personal history, but the history of the sport in general, we haven't really touched a lot on as part of this podcast. So that's really what excited me to bring you on, Patrick, is to talk about an element of this game that people are 100% unaware of. So again, thank you for being on. Happy holidays to you or your family. And we'll chat soon. Let me know when you're in Chicago.
All right. I will, Danny. Thank you so much.
And vice versa. I'll let you know when I'm in Oklahoma.
Yeah, please do. Anytime.
Cheers.
Thanks. See ya.
And that's a wrap for today's episode. We want to express our gratitude to our amazing sponsor, Hive 2.0, for making this season's podcast possible. Hive 2.0 is on a mission to provide an authentic drink experience, offering unique and delicious flavors of hard honey and premium non-alcoholic beverages. It's all about showcasing the quality and passion of the bees' work from hive to hand. Hive 2.0 believes in spreading the joy that honeybees create with every sip, bringing together their life's work with uncharted flavor profiles and the pure aromas of honey. It's a one-of-a-kind drinking experience that you won't find anywhere else. As a special thank you for tuning in to this episode of Outside the Boards, Hive 2.0 is thrilled to offer our listeners an exclusive online discount and free shipping on all 4-packs. Just use the discount code OTBPOLO24 in all capital letters when checking out. Head over to hardhoney.com to explore more about the brand's products and mission. Don't miss out on the chance to enhance your drink experience with Hive 2.0's unique creations. Purchase your 4-pack today. Thank you all for tuning in. Stay refreshed, stay curious, and remember to make every sip count with Hive 2.0. Until next time, take care and hope to see you on the polo field. That was a great episode. What is the one thing you learned from today's conversation? If this episode had an impact on you in some way, then I encourage you to visit and subscribe to our website at OutsideTheBoards.com for more episodes and interviews with incredible guests. Thanks for stopping by, my friends, and hope to see you on the polo field.